DW Africa Link.
Growing up in Cameroon, secondhand clothing, also known as okrika, was my outfit of choice. Okrika clothing was the go-to choice due to its affordability, variety, and durability. It is therefore a practice option for many struggling with economic challenges. With less than $5, I could just pop in to any okrika shop in the morning and come out with a complete outfit for my party in the evening or for an event. Hence, while traditional African outfits like ndop and togo are beautiful, durable, and have cultural significance and could also boost our economy, they do not come cheap, provide limited variety, and cannot easily compete with okrika. So what can be done to ensure that traditional and locally made fashion effectively competes with second-hand clothing, or what Kenyans will call mitumba? My name is Mimi Meponeo. Welcome to Africa Link, the podcast that connects you to the stories that matter from Africa.
Africa Link, every weekday here on DW.
My preference for second-hand clothes differs significantly from that of some young people in Kenya. Whatever the case, this isn't just about fashion. It's about livelihoods, local industry, and the long-term impact of depending on used clothing. For millions of Kenyans, the experience is similar to what I had growing up in Cameroon. Mitumba offers affordability and variety. But while consumers benefit from lower prices, local textile manufacturers struggle to compete. The influx of mitumba raises questions. According to the Kenya National Bureau of Statistics, Kenya imported nearly 38.5 billion Kenyan shillings, which is equivalent to $298 million of second-hand clothes in 2023 alone. That's more than Nigeria, which is 4 times Kenya's population, brought in. This could either be because many Nigerians are turning to local fashion or because some still consider using second-hand clothing shameful. Can Kenya rebuild its textile industry? What policies could balance affordability and local production? And how does this reliance shape Kenya's economic future? Joining me to answer these questions and more is Whitney Ambassa, a marketing specialist with experience in the East Africa textile space. I also have Andrew Wazike with me, who's been following the economic data and the public sentiment around Kenya's ranking and what it means for the region. So I want to begin with you, Whitney, to talk about this very crucial issue about second-hand clothing and importation of second-hand clothing in Kenya. Do you wear second-hand clothing? What are your thoughts about it? Is this something that you fancy?
Second-hand clothing is like a really big business here in Kenya. And yes, I wear second-hand clothes. From thrifting, you are able to find some very nice pieces that you can get either designer at a very affordable price. And also it's environmentally friendly to switch clothes rather than buy new ones all the time.
Also, Kenya is now leading Africa in second-hand clothing imports, beating out Nigeria despite being 4 times smaller in population. What does this tell us about consumer trends driving demand in Kenya?
Well, we've seen the rise from, I think, 2022. Now the industry is at around 38. Last year, the industry rose to around 38.4 billion dollars. So from what we are seeing, it's become a really thriving business. And most people are opting to import second-hand clothing into the market because it's cheaper and it's easier to get in. We've also seen a rise of outlets, like let's say, for example, we have an outlet here called Think Twice. It has over, I think, 10 to 50. It has stores in every single city in Kenya. So it is a really big business at the moment now. Also, like the Kenyan consumers have discovered it as an alternative to buying new clothes because they think slightly the thrifted ones tend to last a bit longer than the fast fashion we have in the market.
Andrew, I now want to come to you and find out how Kenyans are reacting to the news that they are now topping the continent when it comes to secondhand clothing imports. Is it something they feel embarrassed about? Are they proud? Or did they just don't care?
Thank you very much, Mimi. The reaction here in Kenya has been mixed. Some people are genuinely shocked that we've surpassed Nigeria, especially considering the population gap. There is a sense of national embarrassment for some, like you asked, who see this as a sign that our economy isn't creating affordable local alternatives. But for others, it's simply business as usual. Like even for me, secondhand clothing is deeply, deeply embedded in Kenyan life. Like Whitney mentioned, people rely on it and it's very affordable. So to answer your question, so while some see it as a failure of industrial policy, many others are just trying to survive and dress well without breaking the bank.
Winnie, I just want to find out from you, usually when product or any commodity is closer to home, it should be affordable. What explains the fact that clothes that are fabricated in Africa are more expensive and almost inaccessible to the locals? What explains that?
We've seen that there's a rise of sustainable fashion brands coming up in Africa. For example, in Kenya, we have Laila Bear and we have Katush, and I've interacted with the founders quite a lot. You find that what makes sustainable brands in Kenya quite expensive is because they always think about if the product has been like the substances or like the material they're using has been grown ethically. They're looking at ways to find out or to balance how they're going to pay the people who've grown this cotton. For example, is it rain-fed? Is it like the farmers, are they being paid ethically? So that's what makes it a little bit more expensive. However, we can also see that if we had Rivertex here in Kenya back in the, I think, 1960s, and it was doing really well. So if the government can also in like measures and actually provide support for the local textile industry, we can see a little bit of growth. But at the moment, it's just that now the fashion brands have to really ingrain the ethical and the sustainable bit of their fashion brands. So it makes them a little bit more expensive.
When you talk about the need for the government to kind of step in to assist the textile industry, when you look at Nigeria, it imports far less but has stronger local fashion and textile industry. Is Kenya falling behind in building its own capacity? And what can Kenya learn from Nigeria?
Honestly, it is quite sad to see that we have the capacity to do it. It's just that the facilities are not being, well, how do I put it? They're not being availed to us. Because now that will involve the government putting in regulations in regards to the importation of secondhand clothes. And at the moment, it's being run by, let's say, some cartels who have also like chains or like links to government officials. So it will take a lot. And it is really sad to see that there's a huge gap in the population between Nigeria and Kenya. But when you see that we are importing more, it begs the question, like, what's happening? What's going on? So given that we have seen, like back in the 60s, Rivertex was working very well, and it was also supported by the government, there should be a plan put in place to ensure that both sectors can merge and can work cohesively together. For example, the government can provide facilities, can provide machinery, can provide less taxes for anything that might be needed by the millers to make the garments. There's a lot that the government can do, and it is quite sad to see that we've let that part of our textile industry just kind of die down and be run over by the second-hand clothes market. But is it possible to bring it back? Yes. Can we say that one has to die for the other one to thrive? No, because there's need for both. So both of them can with the proper policies, both of them can grow and support each other.
Andrew, I just want to continue the conversation with you to ask, do people view this mostly as a matter of economic hardship? Because you have been talking to people in Kenya. Do they view it as a matter of economic hardship, buying what they can afford, or is there a cultural acceptance of second-hand fashion that's grown over time across Kenya?
To be honest, it's definitely a mix of both. For a lot of Kenyans, this is about affordability. Times are very, very tough, like you know, and second-hand clothes that here we call them mitumba, they offer quality clothes at a fraction of the price of new ones. But there's also that cultural element that has developed over time. I was brought up wearing these clothes, and I also wear the same clothes sometimes now that I'm an adult. So secondhand fashion has become sort of normalized, and it's very, very trendy. Young people especially see it as a way to express personal style affordably because, you know, maybe they don't have, they have not been employed, they cannot buy new clothes. So while economic hardship does play a big role, secondhand clothes are not just a last resort. It's sort of a lifestyle choice for many Kenyans, and I think even East Africans, because I know the market stretches all over the region.
And of course, it's the same situation in West Central Africa. The Kenyan government has talked a lot about industrial growth, yet these numbers suggest the textile sector is struggling. Andrew, is there public trust in government's commitment to revive local production when it comes to this product?
There is growing skepticism on that because there's this thing called Buy Kenya, Build Kenya campaign that has been around for years, but on the ground, there's very little evidence that it's working. We have got local textile manufacturers who are struggling, and some of them have even, I think I've done a story, but it's an environment story on this. They are struggling, and second-hand clothes still dominate the market. So people are starting to question whether the government is serious about building a sustainable textile industry because they launched the Buy Kenya, Build Kenya campaign, or whether it's just a slogan for PR. So there is a disconnect between policy promises and said data like this one. So there's a huge gap.
So, Whitney, there's also environmental hazards at play here. A lot of this clothing eventually ends up in dump sites in some parts of Africa. Do secondhand imports create more waste than benefit in the long run?
We have seen from studies that have been done and research done by organizations like Greenpeace, where they've said like 35% of the second-hand clothes that are imported in Kenya, they usually end up as waste. However, the issue mainly is the problem is with the rise of fast fashion, because we know like the clothes in fast fashion, they are not ethically made. The material used does not, how do I put it? It's not long lasting. It's mostly made out of plastic. So when they come here and the reseller has to like sell it, it brings a problem. Like no one is gonna buy it because already once it has been worn from the first buyer, it loses value, it's stretchy, they end up dumping it. Or in cases you find someone has imported like a container, they wanted to sell maybe like jeans, and then when the container comes, it's full of, let's say, like karate kids uniforms or like torn bed sheets or like stained shirts. Of course, now to them that is considered waste. So in the end, they end up dumping it along Gikomba Market, because when you walk along the Nairobi River, the bank itself is just piles and piles and piles of fabric textile. So I feel they still need to do more research on it, because when you talk to the importers, the second-hand clothes importers, they'll tell you, no, the percentage of what they call waste is relative to someone because there's different grades of clothes being brought in. There is, I'm not going to deny, there is like waste clothes that come in. We just need to decide on the percentage so that we do not say second-hand clothes are categorically 100% bad, because they do provide a service to a certain quarter, like a certain majority of people who live in Africa. Also, we just need to get the proper research. But yes, there are with the importation and lack of actually also proper sorting from the global north countries, you find some clothes do end up here being considered as waste, causing environmental pollution.
And so, Whitney, what policy direction would make sense here? Should countries like Kenya restrict second-hand imports to protect local industries? Or is there a smarter way to coexist with this trade?
Yes, Mimi, yes, there's a clear contrast. Nigeria has traditionally been strict about second-hand clothing imports. They have partial bans in place, and they have also enforced stronger support for its local fashion industry. And when you see somebody dressed as a Nigerian, you can tell them from far away. This is an image that they have cemented across the globe. In Kenya, the mitumba trade, which is the second-hand clothes trade, is more entrenched and sort of politically sensitive because of how many jobs it supports. Many people are employed in this industry. So while Nigeria is protecting local production, Kenya has taken a stance where it seems to be balancing between economic reality and political convenience. So here I can say that clearly Nigeria is more assertive in shaping its industrial policy, while Kenya is more reactive. So it's allowing the market to dominate, even if it undermines long-term goals, because so many people are employed in this business, Mimi.
And so, Whitney, what policy direction would make sense here? Should countries like Kenya restrict second-hand imports to protect local industries? Or is there a smarter way to coexist with this trade?
I honestly do not believe there will be like just one sec. In regards of policies, the way we've discussed, it's going to be really hard to say let's completely 100% ban secondhand clothing in Kenya, because it has provided a lot of jobs for a lot of people. Like we are talking about in terms of hundreds of thousands of people are employed at Gikomba market because of secondhand clothes. However, it is also really sad to see the fact that we are just letting our local textile industry just die down because of vested interest in secondhand clothing. Therefore, what I think is there needs to be balance between the two. The government and the second-hand clothes market can come together because they can coexist. Because let's be factual, not everybody can afford brand new clothes every single time. So yes, the second-hand clothes market does serve a purpose. However, we should have stricter laws and policies in regulating what actually comes into the country. We do have the EPR laws right now, but now even if you're trying to hold the producers responsible for what they do, for what they bring or what they make, we still need to have stricter policies on what are we importing, what are like from the sorting companies, what have they put into the boats that are coming in slowly by slowly, because this just can't happen overnight. In a couple of years there will be a balance, so the government can also put in infrastructures and policies to ensure that the local cotton growers get compensated fairly. The market is right. They provide just the facilities to ensure that the industry does grow, because it is proven, like we have seen it work in the 60s. So now we have better technology. The technology has improved, the circumstances have improved. So we should be able to have a thriving local textile industry as well as also a sustainable second-hand clothes market industry.
So this question goes to the two of you. Andrew, please feel free to be the first person to answer. Let us look at the bigger picture here. Should Africa actually be importing in the first place when it comes to second-hand clothing? Should we actually be doing that in Africa?
I think secondhand clothing is helping millions of people survive. Yes, we should, because it's not helping just consumers like me. It's also helping traders. It does provide jobs and affordable clothing.
Andrew, are we going to need that if we boost local production?
Well, local production can be expensive, Mimi, and you know that. The key point here is affordable clothing and employment to others. So if we say we are going to only buy Ghanaian, buy Senegalese, buy Kenyan, buy Tanzanian, the problem is that it's almost 5 times as expensive compared to buying secondhand clothing. So I think we do need to get secondhand clothes, but it has to have some sort of governance so that we don't become a dumping ground for secondhand clothes.
We need, Andrew just some sort of summarized it, like, even though I differ, but we are a continent of more than 50 countries. We are a continent of more than 50 countries. And if the import and export was within Africa, I think it could be a solution, right? Instead of...
First of all, I believe we can generate our own secondhand clothes, because if, for example, we have countries in the west of Africa that have a very thriving local textile industry, if you wear your clothes, you produce them. So where will Nigeria take their old clothes? We can always put infrastructure like collection centers in the countries, and then just circulate the clothes amongst ourselves. We are also able to, like, for example, here in Kenya, we have collection centers. We have events called swap meets, where we meet. You bring your old clothes that you do not wear. I bring mine. We exchange at a very low cost, because 100%, there might be something that I have somebody else wants, and then there might be something else that somebody else has that I want. So we can swap. I believe, I'm with you, Mimi. I believe we are capable of generating our own second-hand clothes. We just need to regulate who brings what into whose country, because we are so many. So if we are able to sustain our own local textile industry, of course, that will mean new production, old clothes, and then we just create our own circular system within ourselves, amongst ourselves. And then that will also prevent us from getting oversized t-shirts, because I don't believe there is anyone who's the size of like a man who eats McDonald's in America. So we should be able to do this by ourselves.
Thank you so much, Whitney and Andrew. Thank you. In recent years, several African nations have taken significant steps to regulate the importation of second-hand clothing, aiming to bolster their domestic textile industries and reduce reliance on used apparel from abroad. The East African community, comprising countries like Kenya, Tanzania, Uganda, Rwanda, and Burundi, collectively resolved in 2016 to ban imported used clothing by 2019. The objective was to rejuvenate the regional textile sector and promote local industries. However, implementation varied among member states, with some facing challenges due to economic dependencies and international trade dynamics. Rwanda stands out as a pioneer in this initiative. In 2016, the Rwandan government increased tariffs on imported used clothes to phase out importation eventually. This policy aimed to stimulate local production and consumption of made-in-Rwanda products. While the move faced opposition, particularly from international exporters, Rwanda maintained its stance. Uganda had also made moves to curb the influx of second-hand clothing. In August 2023, President Yoweri Museveni announced a ban on the importation of used clothing, asserting that such imports stifle the development of local textile industries. He emphasized the need to support domestic production to foster economic growth and reduce dependency on foreign goods. While these policies aim to protect and promote textile industries, they also present challenges. The second-hand clothing market is a significant source of employment and affordability apparel for many Africans. Therefore, governments are tasked with balancing the promotion of local industries with the socioeconomic realities of their population. That's it for this edition of Africa Link podcast. Remember, you're not just a listener, but also part of our community, and your engagement can shape the direction of our discussions. We value your insights and encourage you to share your thoughts with us. Remember to also follow so that you can catch all the Africa Link episodes. This podcast was co-produced and edited by Isaac Mugabe. My name is Mimi Mefoneu. Thank you for listening, and until next time.
DW News.
Here are today's top news stories and why they matter. A major street in Senegal's capital, Dakar, will now be named after the country's independence icon, Mamadou Dia. The street, known as Boulevard General de Gaulle, was named after a former French president, Charles de Gaulle. But Senegalese President Bassirou Diomaye has decided that the street will now no longer bear the name of the former French leader. How significant is this? The renaming is a boost to Diomaye's intention to replace colonial-era monuments and streets with the names of national and African heroes. The renaming of the said street will officially be marked on Friday, April 4, when Senegal celebrates its 65th independence from France. Who is Mamadou Dia? Mamadou Dia was Senegal's first prime minister who was forced to resign and later imprisoned over accusations of attempted coup d'etat. He is considered one of the fighters for Senegalese independence, alongside Léopold Sédar, the nation's first president. Dia passed away in 2009 at the age of 98. Moving on now, U.S. President Donald Trump's new reciprocal tariff regime has now been extended to Africa. Almost all African countries, including key U.S. trading countries, namely South Africa, Nigeria, Kenya, Angola, and Ghana, have now had tariffs imposed on their exports to the U.S. market. Trump says the measure is designed to counter what his administration views as unfair trade practices. So how is Africa reacting? DW's Thuso Kumalo gauges the mood in Southern Africa.
So in South Africa, business really consider the Trump tariffs as a setback. They consider the imposition of a 30% tariff increase on South Africa by the U.S. as a move that will have dire consequences on the country's economy. The U.S. is South Africa's second largest trading partner after China. Trade between the two countries is valued at $23 billion. In 2024, South Africa's exports to the U.S. totaled $14.7 billion. Platinum, pills, stone, glasses, iron, steel, and transportation equipment are part of the long list of the products that South Africa exports to the U.S. These high tariffs could lead to a reduction in the quantities of these items being exported, and that will affect jobs in a country where unemployment is around 32%. The U.S. has already suspended all aid to South Africa, including funds meant to help 17% of South Africans living with HIV and AIDS. Here are some reactions from South Africans.
We've done some work that suggests that in the long term, South Africa is likely to become closer and closer to its BRICS partners, particularly Russia and China, and probably further away from its partners in the West.
Unfortunately, in this country, we do come from a past where we know what lack of HIV response looks like. It looks like thousands of people dying because they're not getting the treatment that they need or not keeping on the treatment that they need.
Thank you, Thuso. And finally, the African Union mediators who have arrived in South Sudan's capital, Juba, will be hoping to make progress with talks aimed at preventing a breakout of another civil war. Tensions have been high following the house arrest of first Vice President Riek Machar last week. President Salva Kiir's government accuses Machar of trying to stir up a new rebellion. Who are those leading the AU mediation efforts? The AU delegation's Council of the Wise include former Burundian President Domitien Ndayizeye and former Kenyan Judge Effie Owo. As SPLM-IO party said in a statement that it warmly welcomes the arrival of the Council of Wise as part of ongoing efforts to de-escalate tensions